Hello and welcome to another It's Not Rocket Science with me, Lindsay Setchell. And today we're going to talk about bars. What are bars? What are they? Why are they there? So we're going to recognize where they are in the foot and why they are there, and also how we should treat them, because it's this one here which has an awful lot of controversy surrounding it. People don't know how to treat bars. They don't know whether to leave them or not because they keep growing, and so therefore if they keep growing, should you just leave them alone and let the horse deal with them? Well, I'll tell you why you can't just leave bars alone. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into this It's Not Rocket Science lesson. Let's just get rid of my rocket. Bars. That's what we're doing today. Right, so let's draw our foot. So we're going to have our foot here. Oh, sorry about my awful drawings. Here's the frog. So what we have here is the basis, looking at the foot, looking at the sole of the foot and the frog. Now, where are the bars? Well, the heel is a triangle here on each side of the foot. Here's the heel. These are the heels. And there's two of them, 1, 2. Where are the bars? Well, the bars grow out here, just from the heel. Just from the heel. Now, you could split the frog in half. It's not quite in half, is it? And the bars don't quite reach halfway down. These are the true bar, what we call the true bar. Now, the true bar is hoof wall, just like this is hoof wall. I'll draw it in a bit better in a minute. And it has its own laminae. So that means that it connects to the inside part of the foot by these clever little finger-like projections that slot into each other, and that's what keeps the hoof capsule connected to the inside of the foot, the corium, the dermis, the bit where all the blood is. So the hoof capsule itself doesn't have any blood at all. It doesn't have any nerves. It doesn't have any soft tissue. That all comes from being adjacent to the little finger-like projections that do have all of those soft tissues, that dermis or that corium it's often called. So here are the bars. They don't go quite all the way down the frog, but you're going to find in a minute why this is so important to understand, because you often see far more bar material far further down the frog. So the wall itself is made up of, sorry about this, the wall itself is made up of an inner hoof wall and an outer hoof wall. Here we go. And that inner and outer hoof wall is horn, and it comes all the way down to the heel and it comes out at the bar. So this is the wall, which is made of the inner hoof wall and the outer hoof wall. Now, we're not talking about that at the moment, but it's important to understand because this part, which is the bar, also has an inner and an outer hoof wall. It also has a white line. Well, of course it would if it's got laminae, which it does have, so therefore you would see a white line. So that is the essence of the bottom of the foot. You have the frog, you have the wall, and all of this bit inside here is the sole, and that sole should be in a bowl. Now, depending on the breed, if you've got thoroughbreds or low-heeled horses, they tend to have a slightly wider foot with slightly less bowl effect. Then you go on to horses that are more heavier breeds, and cobs, big Clydesdales, Shires. They're going to have usually a big, much more of a bowl effect going down into, from the outer hoof wall into the frog. Now that's important, understanding that bowl, because what happens with bars is, just like the rest of the wall and the heels, is that they grow Now, when they're in that bowl effect, if you can imagine, and I'm going to draw this for you in a second, but if you can imagine that bowl, in fact, let's draw it now. So let's draw it here. We're looking at the side of the horse's foot. Here are the heel bulbs, and here we've got the frog coming down into that bowl, and then the frog is up here, and you have those heels there too. This is the toe. And of course, this whole area needs to be completely balanced. We've talked about dorsopalmar balance before. And that bowl effect comes down to the tip of the frog. Watch, actually the frog's going to be further up here. Let's just do it up here. There we go. So this is the frog. Okay. Looking at it from the side. Looking at it from the side. Try and visualize it. We're looking at the side of the foot. Now there would be wall in the way of there. It's like I've cut the wall away and we're looking straight through the side of the horse's foot. Now the bars come along here. Here they are. And they also go down into that bowl, into that solar bowl. Now, oftentimes when we see horses trimmed, we see bars being left here. We call that the shoulder of the bar. And that bar is the same height, being left at the same height as the heel. Well, that's no good. And then because the horse is walking on that, and the horse does not want active pressure on the bars. We've talked about things that are active and passive. We have an active pillar of support, and we have 2 active heels. So that's 3 points. Very occasionally on an incredibly symmetrical foot, we might have 4 points, 2 points at the toe and 2 points at the heels. But usually what we see is just off center, we have a pillar of support towards the medial side, usually, but it can flip to the other side. And we have the 2 heels. That's really important because not everything on the horse's foot is in active contact with the ground at all times. So if you're on a horse is walking across hard ground, then really the main pillars of support are in active, always in active contact with the ground. That's why we call them in active wear. The passive wear does get worn, but on a flat surface, they're not in contact with the ground. And what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking usually about this area of the frog here. This starts to become in contact towards the back, but this area towards the deeper part of the bowl in here shouldn't be in contact. And then we're talking about the bars because they come either side of the frog, and so they're not in contact. They're coming down lower than the frog because here, down in this area here, we have those 2 grooves, don't we, along the side of the frog. And we call those the collateral grooves. And that's where they live, all the way down here. They live either side of the frog, and they're deeper towards the back than they are, of course, towards the front. But we're not talking about the collateral grooves. We're talking about the bar, which grows up. The bar wall itself comes up from deep down in the corium, which is where the walls grow from, which is where the sole grows from. And they grow up until we can see them. And then we see that inner and outer hoof wall, and we see that white line. So when we're looking at the side shot again, so this part here, let's colour this in black. This is the frog. This here is the frog here. And what we've done here with this horse, this person who has trimmed it, has left the bar too long here, which is the shoulder of the bar, which means that active pressure is not just on the heel, which is here, but we've also got active pressure on the top of the bar. That's not good because the horse shouldn't have that. And then the bar often dips down and ends here. Well, that's where it should end. But actually what happens is over time that this bar, it grows and it gets longer. And when it gets longer, it starts getting pressure. It then starts to fold over. And underneath there, you have all these lovely little gremlins that like to live in there. And they love smelly, dark places. And they go and live underneath the bar. These are little microbes, little pathogens. And they like to get right underneath there and have a pathogen party underneath the bars. And this is because the bars are left too long. So then what happens is you start to get more bar material all along the side of the frog, and it's not true bar. This is excess bar material that hasn't worn away and sole material, and it starts to get into contact with the ground, particularly on low-heeled, less concave, less bowl effect breeds of horses like thoroughbreds. So you often pick up a thoroughbred and you look across at the lateral part, toe, heels, and you look across the foot. And as you're looking across, if you see any lumps and bumps in there, that's excess bar and sole material that horse is now walking on, and that's painful. You see horses that don't like walking on uneven surfaces that are hard. That's one of the reasons. People always think it's the sole. Usually it isn't the sole, it's pressure points that are where there's excess build-up of sole stroke bar material. So let's just look at this here now. Now this foot wasn't trimmed. The bars weren't trimmed at the last trim, and they've left the bars, and when they came back and did the next trim, they didn't trim the bars then. And this is what happens. The bars begin to fold over and then begin to accrete material down the side of the frog. A bit like this, folded over. So now what we have is we have less and less material of sole here and here. That's a problem, because if you're following the horse's natural constants and you need to trim those heels back to the hard sole plane, the HSP, the hard sole plane, well, you're going to struggle because you can't see where the HSP is now. And the more that this bar starts to fold over, the more it covers this area here, and the more the heels become underrun. So the heels start underrunning. So the heels are going that way because they're beginning to underrun. Now we've really got a problem. All because we didn't trim those bars back correctly and find that seat of corn, which is the area between the bar, the wall, and the heel. Because we didn't find that area correctly, we don't know where the heels need to live now. So we're guessing where we should put the heel. So now we have not only this material here, and here come these pathogens, these little gremlins that like to live underneath there, and they start to cause even more problems. And then beyond that, you start to get these big lumps of excess material coming down the side of the frog. And sometimes when they're not trimmed, particularly with cobby feet in that, where you've got that bowl effect and nothing is being worn now, because as soon as these start to become active, they will start to get some wear, pressure points. But on horses where it's even more like a bowl, this just carries on. It doesn't get worn, and it carries on all the way around the tip of the frog, the apex of the frog. And we call this a monobar. We like to call it a monobar, like a monobrow. It shouldn't be there. This is excess material, but it gets worse. Not only is this excess material here, it doesn't stay there. It's been missed by the hoof care professional, and what happens is this excess material starts to spread out, and it starts to cover more and more of the sole, until eventually you've got very little sole showing that you can find the HSP. You don't know where it is because all of this in here has become compacted. And that's starting to become a really big problem for the horse, because more begins to compact and more begins to compact, and the heels come further and further forward, until eventually what you have is you don't know where the true bar ends and you don't know where the compacted material begins. Your heels are moving forward, and before you know it, you come along and you trim this horse every 6 weeks or even longer because you've not been looking after this bar material, and then you end up having heels underrunning with compaction all around the seat of corn, compaction all around the frog, and the only bit of sole that you see is here. And then it gets even worse, because a hoof care professional will come along and they'll take this toe off. We don't want that, let's get rid of that, we'll take that off. And then the horse, being damaged as a trauma response, goes, well, I'm going to put a callus here now because I want to try and protect P3, so here's my callus. And now how much sole do you have available to you? How much of this HSP can you see now? Well, barely any. You've got a tiny bit here, maybe a tiny bit there, and a tiny bit there. Now this horse has got pressure points all over the sole of its foot. It's going to therefore feel the ground, uneven ground, a lot more keenly than a horse that was trimmed correctly with all of these pressure points removed. And this horse is going to get bruising. So when we then come along and we go, right, well, crikey, we need to trim off all of this extra bar material, and that can be difficult because some of it's so compacted that what you actually see is just one lumpy flat sole. So over here, where we used to have a bowl, we've now just got one completely flat sole. And that's when people go, my horse has got flat soles. No, they haven't. No horse has got a flat sole. All horses have a bowl effect to their sole that comes down from the walls. But unfortunately, if you're leaving bar material, then it does actually look like you haven't got any concavity. So let's go down here. Now we've removed all that material. The heels are coming back to where they used to be. Down here, we've cleared the seat of corn, which is fantastic. We've now got the heels where they need to be. We can start to see the true bar starting to appear again. All of this is getting cleared, but now what we have is we now have little areas, little blushy areas of bruising around the foot. Little areas where we see bruising. And over here, in this area here, because it got so infected, what we now have is we have black little bits running down the side of the true bar where the white line is. It's getting infected. And all of this area here could become a big infection. And that is an abscess. And we see them time and time again. So let me just get rid of this in the gremlin. Out he goes. And let's draw the back of the horse's foot. Let's use blue for this. So we're drawing, here are the heels. We go down there in the collateral groove. We've got a bit of frog. We're coming down to the collateral groove. We're back up to the heel. That comes down. We've then got the foot. Oops. That's coming down, and then we've got the leg coming down here. Oh, apologies. We're looking at the back of the foot. Here are the heels, the toes way over there, and that's what we're looking at here. Now, normally, when you have bars that are going down towards the side of the frog, that are going down here, that's all normal and fine. But when the bars start to get all overgrown and compacted, and they become the same height as the heels, and they're not being addressed, and we start to get those little gremlins getting in there. Here he is, and he's going in, and he's going underneath that folded over bar. Then what you start to get is an infection, because the bar runs down here. This is where it grows from. This is where the bar grows from. And this is where the lamini is, just down here. This is where all the blood is, all the soft tissue, and that's where it grows from. So what happens is those gremlins get inside there, and before you know it, you start to get an infection. And that infection is painful every time that horse puts his foot down. And that infection travels around. It loves to travel around this area here. It spreads, starts to travel around. So this is all infection now. And this has got a little infection on this side, and you can't see it. You can't see it. You've got excess bar material over here, and you can't even see it. You don't know that all that infection is living underneath all of this. All of this excess material, and the infection is all underneath it. You don't know because you can't see it. And your horse is footy, is footsore. He doesn't like uneven surfaces. We put that down to 101 things, but oftentimes it's problems with the frog and issues with pressure points that shouldn't be there. So if we go back to this, what then happens is usually after a period of lameness, when the horse goes really lame and the lameness just starts getting worse, that's an abscess, it will then pop at the coronary band, just there. And you'll see pus oozing out the back, right at the heels, above the heel bulbs, because there's been infection all underneath this area here and this area here. And a few trims later, you come along, not on the first trim after the abscess or even the second trim after the abscess, but usually on the third or fourth trim, you come along and you see, you're finding the true bar, and you start to see the sole begin to peel off. And underneath it is usually this black area that was the infection, which is pretty smelly and stinky. All because the bars weren't treated correctly. So just as a recap, what are the bars? They're there for structure and flexibility. And how should you treat them? You treat them by keeping them trimmed back so that you can see the inner hoof wall of the bar, the outer hoof wall of the bar, the white line of the bar, just like you should see that in the wall. And if you can't, your bar is probably overgrown. And if you let your bars go overgrown, that's when you start to get havoc letting loose in the horse's foot. So top tip, keep on top of your bars. Then you can find the HSP. Then the heels will come back to where they need to be. And then you won't get into this problem where you're chasing pathology all the time because your horse starts getting infection in the foot. All because those bars were not understood and not trimmed. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that lesson all about the bars, and I look forward to seeing you in the next It's Not Rocket Science lesson. I'm Lindsay Setchell. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Bye-bye.